Hello, and welcome to the Forum, our daily chat with leaders in the immersive industry. My name is Renee Pinnell. I'm your host, and we've got Noah J. Nelson from No Proscenium. Did I just fuck up your last name?
No. No
Oh,
one ever
you
said
made a face
no
when
one ever
I said your last name, and I was like, oh god, did I screw your name up?
Yeah, that's right. It's the middle initial. So
there's always this little panic in the back of my mind whenever I say anybody's name that I'm gonna fuck it up.
I'm
hyper tuned to that.
I just
apologize live there
ahead of time. So particularly if I have to read someone's name before I've heard it, it's
yeah.
Like, and I was a substitute teacher at one point, so that that the meme is real. So
it's a good way to live your life. Just apologize before you enter any conversation. I apologize. Something bad is going to happen. It's going to come out of my mouth. It won't be intentional. I'm sorry in advance. So what we do on this show is we talk to my favorite people in our funny little industry, and I let y'all on the line get to know them as people. So I've known Noah since 2016, I think. Yelena from Oculus introduced us. She brought you into our first Dev Lab program, right? I think that's
yeah.
That was I think that was the moment where we first met.
I got embedded into the Dev Lab to help cover it, and it was an amazing experience because you had brought out all these fantastic folks, and it was the kind of thing I really love to see, which is the people from the live physical side of immersive and the digital side of immersive coming together and sort of sharing their knowledge. And it's always exciting when that happens. It's the whole theory behind what I do.
Yeah, I was about to say that's a good segue into talking about No Proscenium. So Noah, why don't you give us a quick overview of what No Proscenium is and what you're doing with it?
Sure. No Proscenium is the unmodestly self-styled The Guide to Everything Immersive, which is something we try and live up to. It's hard because we're an all-volunteer crew. We started off as a newsletter 5 years ago that was covering the immersive theater scene in Los Angeles, and we have since spidered out to be a podcast. Now there's live streams. There's a floor wax. It's also a dessert topping. That's an old Saturday Live joke. We've got correspondents in New York, San Francisco, Portland, London. It's an all volunteer crew. We're aimed at becoming actually a nonprofit. So like we'll be a piece of public media, before the day is through. Not today. The lawyers take longer than that. But our mission is simple. It is to basically evangelize for the form, both across physical and digital.
That's one of the things I really like about your podcast and tuning into your feed. Is you do cover way more the immersive physical theater installation side than most folks, and I think that's such an important vein in the immersive world. There's so much that people can prototype and learn, and I feel like in a lot of ways it's kind of the bleeding edge because it's cheaper and easier to do things in the real world sometimes. I kind of feel like, especially you can have sentient agents, people, that you interact with, which is much harder to do with virtual characters and an experience that you have in a headset.
Yeah, right now it is cheaper to get a actual being than a virtual being up and running. But some of the most exciting stuff is where the convergence point is. I mean, for me, I started I started that newsletter when I got back from a pilgrimage to New York. I had been covering the transmedia world. This was 6 years ago. I was actively covering that as part of my beat. I was covering the intersection of tech and entertainment. So that led to transmedia. There was a lot of ARG stuff going on, and there had been this little dinner party that was filled with like theater makers and VR designers and Imagineers. We got together on a regular basis. We were obsessed with the idea of the live side of this stuff. We were like, how can we get it off the computers and into the physical world? And we were talking about, producing work together. everyone was working at way too high a level to like do that. So it was one of those like, creatives don't necessarily do like fantasy football leagues. What they do is like fantasy creation leagues where they get together and they're like, it'd be cool if we did. And then they just like have lots of dinner parties around that.
Yeah.
That's
well, because it's so much easier to just, I kind of wish everything was just conceptual art, because it's almost the best part of it, is when you come up with the idea and you're like, oh, I can see it in my mind. It'd be glorious. And then you think about like all the steps you'd have to take to make it real. And
yeah.
I guess that's what separates real artists from people like us that just talk about real artists.
But there's definitely a lot of that. And the venture that exists now existed because we were getting pretty serious. And at a certain point, the others were like, Noah, you should go see Sleep No More. And I was like, yeah, if we're gonna dedicate our lives to this stuff, I should certainly like have a sense of what was going on. And so I went back east and I saw in quick succession, I saw Sleep No More and Then She Fell. And Sleep No More is, absolutely, it's overwhelming. There's a key thing in there though, particularly as it applies to storytelling in VR and XR. That we'll get to in a second, but Sleep No More was kind of overwhelming. I didn't necessarily connect with the material. It's kind of hard to connect with the first time. Like there's so much going on that you have to kind of learn how to see
very
the show.
layered.
Then you go back. Then She Fell's a lot more controlled, contained. It's the difference between a sandbox and a dark ride. Then She Fell's a dark ride. And I came out of that and I was just completely blown away. And when I got back to LA, I said, well, someone's got to be tracking this work. This work has to be going on in LA. That would seem weird if it wasn't. Someone's going to be tracking it. Are the alt weeklies tracking it? No. Is LA Times tracking it? No. Is there some weird art blog? No. I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to be the weird art blog then. So we took the email chain that we had of that dinner party, and I said, all right, everybody, go move this to MailChimp, and everyone tell a friend. And that's how it started.
That's awesome.
And I just kept on. I was writing theater reviews occasionally for my day job and also for like another there was another publication down here, and I said like, hey, would you take my immersive theater reviews, because that was the cheapest way to put spotlights on stuff. And that is like the essential, one of the essential functions that people like you really bring to creators is you get to have that spotlight function. It's as an artist, you often feel like you're just toiling in obscurity, and having somebody that cares enough and is has educated themselves on the discipline to say, hey, this is really cool, everybody should check this out, and here's the reasons why, like that is so important. Yeah, there's a big part of this which is, and the mission is to elevate the work, the mission. And that means both give it a platform and, when possible, elevate the quality of it. Right. So insofar as there's a theory of the criticism behind it, I approach that the way I would approach criticism in a classroom, the way I would approach criticism as if I was back in theater school. I have a degree in theater. Like that was.
Oh, so that's why, you're sort of, 1 foot firmly planted in that world.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
And the thing that's, when we draw back up to the macro level and look at, well, how does XR and the theater, how do those interrelate? What's going on? Why was there an Immersive Design Summit that brought together like, people from Punch Drunk and Oculus, people from The Void and, Disney, and then folks who were like making immersive theater in their bathrooms, right? Like why are we pulling these different groups of people together? And the first part of that puzzle was when I was in Sleep No More that first time. There's a scene in the ballroom. It's one of the first big scenes. And at that, initially you're kind of dropped into the space and you are following one character. Maybe you've jumped around and followed some other characters, but all roads lead to this ballroom scene. And when you come in, get in there early enough, you start to notice that each character, when they come in, they're followed by like 5 to 30 people, but each character pays attention. They pay obsequience to Lady M because she's down there on the floor, and everybody checks in with her. And it creates this interesting social proofing effect where you get these people coming in who are being followed by a retinue of audience members. That person then, pays the social capital cost to Lady M. And then suddenly everyone starts to be fixated on her. She's drawn all the power in the room to herself in terms of attention. And then at a critical moment, with the tiniest change in light, subtle, and a little in the shift in the music, she casts her gaze up dramatically to the balcony where Mackers has entered. And you watch this room full of people with masks on, all of which have, are like this, little pointers. You watch this room go from looking at her to looking at him, and all these little arrows point upward, and your eye cannot help but be drawn there.
Yeah.
And I was standing there going like, oh, so this is how you do attention management in VR 360 video. Like literally that was the thought in my head at the time, which meant I was not so connected to the story in the moment because I was like in the aesthetics. but that was the year that when I saw it, the year that the Oculus was backstage at E3, and you had people like Dan Fung Dennis were like, experimenting with 360 video. And the conventional wisdom of the time was like, you can't do an edit, right? Edits are impossible in 360 video. I mean, that was blown away 6 months later. And I was one of the people
that was such a funny time, right? Was this 2014, 2015?
Yeah, it was 2014. Yeah. Or maybe even 2013. It was really, even 6 years ago this October was when I went. So
that feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it?
It feels like a generation ago.
Yeah, the last 6 years has just been this wild blur. And I want to talk about the blur, because I think so much has happened. And for me, I stepped away the last year because I had a kid with my wife, and that forced me to kind of take a moment. And now that I'm re-engaging, the other reason I do these is honestly just to I was going to do these calls anyways with everyone to just sort of figure out what the fuck's going on. And I was like, well, I'll just invite people to them. And
speed, what's up? So
yeah. So what is up? We went through this period where everything was just experimental. We were figuring out, that you can do cuts, and there was all this ripe potential. And then I feel like there was this phase of sort of professionalizing where we had this first wave of experiments. Then people learned from those, and are like, okay, I think I've started to get a theory about how one can tell a story, or how you can have an experience that's really satisfying. And then you got a wave of projects like, Battle Scar, which is just finishing the third installation at Venice, and Spheres, and a lot of other things. So I'm really curious from your perspective, can you give me a couple of projects from that first wave you already have? You're talking about, from the immersive theater side, Sleep No More, and Then She Fell. What about some other things that are maybe in the VR world specifically that were in that first wave that you feel were really seminal?
Oh boy. It's easy to point to Nani's work, right? And just go there. And
for people who don't know, Nani
De La Peña.
De La Peña, she was the sort of the godmother, or is the godmother of VR. She worked on, her first project was Hunger in LA, right?
Hunger in Los Angeles, Hunger in LA, which showed up. That was the pre-Oculus project, Palmer
with Lucky Palmer,
that lab assistant on that one. That they showed at Sundance. I want to say, was it 2013?
I think. Really? 11?
Maybe
maybe, I don't know.
2012.
Yeah.
It was. I've only been to Sundance twice. It was my first. It was the second Sundance I had gone to. So it must have been 2012. So it was, Sundance 2012, and I missed it because they were doing it, and they were walking around. They had the crossbar on their head, and there were other things going on there at the time, the Film Board of Canada, I think called Bear 71, that I was really interested in, and there was a line for it, and I was I don't know if I want to walk around with that crossbar on my head. I look like I'm trying to bring back Jesus or something. So I was maybe I'll go in later, but I was also VR, didn't we learn that didn't work in the 90s? Isn't that the point? And they were rendering it all in game engine, and that was the other thing. I had a graphics bias, and I was this looks like Unreal 1.0. I don't want to. Literally, the thought was I don't know if I want to do a homelessness thing and that's rendered in Unreal. I live in Los Angeles. It's bad. We didn't even know it got much worse actually.
Yeah.
But then couple, it was another year and a half before I was in that lab, and use of force, which was one of the pieces she did after that, is probably for me the most seminal one, because it teaches you so much about the power of live audio, like the power of real audio to convey the story. You're still in game engine, but just that act of hearing, I came out of that piece. This is a piece where there was a guy who was killed by Border Patrol. He was beaten to death. Sorry, everybody, content warning. Beaten to death in front of, people with early camera phones, like just like really like crappy camera phones. And so this is one of those first, instances of an abuse of power that was recorded by the public. And so Nani took the footage from that and turned it, choreographed it in game engine.
But use the source audio, right?
Yeah, and use the source audio. And in the source audio, I can't remember exactly what they're saying, but this phrase keeps on getting repeated by this one woman. And when I came out of it, I was like, did you loop that audio? And she was like, no, she kept saying that. Wow. She was like trying to get them to stop. And I was just like, oh my God. And it really, really shook me. And it was a great testament and sort of a preview of where we would head, because it was all being rendered in game engine. And if you think about that, that was about 4 years ago. And they've got college resources, which means that they don't necessarily have like the ability to buy the best game engine and render things that way. But even then, you go back 4 years ago, and rendering things like that in game engine mean, things are still relatively primitive as it goes. And then you go to something like right now, like you go to the Unreal, user group at SIGGRAPH, and they show off everything, and you're getting, one step shy. Like we've crawled out of the uncanny valley, and like we're grasping at, the plateau of real, like by our fingernails. It's like, yeah, we can render that in real time. We can stick an iPhone in front of someone's face, like hang it like here, in someone's front of space, and render a fully photorealistic character. Probably not as animated as my face gets, but you can render a character in real time, and your brain just starts to melt from the possibilities, or the fact that, that's the technology they're using when they're shooting The Mandalorian. And, they're looking at the finished effects essentially in the monitors on set so that they know exactly what it looks like. So we're so close on that level to the photorealism to get over that, like the graphic snob thing of like, it looks like Unreal 1.0. I don't want to look at this thing. Now it's like, oh yeah, this is photorealistic. Processing power that it takes to render.
And so that jump happened between Hunger in Los Angeles and Force of Action?
No, like between Use of Force and now, right? So
got it.
Like that's like Use of Force is sort of like where that's where I put a pin down, is like, here's where we're starting, something kind of crude, but then still but the audio was driving it. And I think that's,
that's the thing with her work, is that all of it that I've seen does have kind of that, the graphic elements are not the important part to Noni's work. And the fact that it had real audio, and both of those projects had real audio.
And that's the other thread, right? So you get the game engine thread on one level, and then you get this other thread, which is the audio thread. I mean, the fact that those Bose glasses exist, right, to pump out spatial audio. And I don't know if those are going to take off. I think that's a relatively niche product, unfortunately, because so much of what drives really great, XR work is the audio.
Totally
so
agree.
much of you maintaining that sense of presence.
Can you give us some examples? Like, what are I still want to, one of the things that I'm fascinated to talk to you about is your sort of best of hits over the years, because you've seen so much stuff. So maybe this is a good opportunity to what are some projects that really push audio in innovative ways?
So the funny thing to me is that the piece that still is the most incredible when it comes to a pure audio experience is a piece that was done, I think, in 2012, right?
Oh, wow.
So it sort of shows that the technology's been here all along. And it's a piece called Her Long Black Hair, which is a pod play, what we call a pod play. But they didn't even call it a pod play back then, because they didn't talk about podcasts the way we do now. It's a site-specific piece in Central Park that is it might be a series of audio files because I had to break them up in those days. You download the audio, you download a few pictures, and you go to a very specific spot in Central Park, and then it directs you on a path that you walk through.
I had to learn about. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, we lost you at multiple audio files. You're in Central Park.
Okay, so you're all right. So multiple audio files and some pictures, and you
like
download
physical
those.
pictures that you're holding.
You could print them out if you wanted to, and indeed, in 2012, that's what people did. Now, you just have them on your phone because everything's on your phone, right?
Yeah.
But you could print them out if you wanted. You have these pictures and you have these audio files, and it sends you to a very specific spot in Central Park, and you press play, and then they give you initially like an obvious, but then they kind of fade it down. Sound of footsteps, and they say, sync your footsteps to the walking, and that stays with you all along, kind of brought down low to kind of keep you on a very specific pace. And then what they've done is they recorded the whole piece using a binaural recording rig, so a binaural head. And again, they did this like in 2012. It was part of a big like site specific art thing that was going on in New York. And you walk through Central Park and you keep the pace, and you get these moments where you can no longer tell what audio is in your headphones and what audio is in the real world, and you'll hear something in the distance, and you'll come around a corner and you're not sure if you're going to see a saxophonist or not, and it creates this.
I feel that way all the time. I'm always just assuming there's going to be a saxophonist that jumps out behind a corner, and is it real? Is it in my mind?
Yeah,
that's just me though.
Well, and then but you'll hear they do a lot of stuff where you hear passerbys walking by you in the audio inside, but then it'll start happening for real, and you'll be like, oh, that must be in the headphones, and then someone walks by, you're like, oh, it's not in the headphones. What's going on? And it's not, there's no positional data, so it's not like now if we were doing that in those bows, if you turned your head, it would get relative. It wouldn't need certain things. It would be able to trigger off of the spatial cues. But the illusion it creates of layering in another reality just with sound alone, really, I've rarely seen it surpassed in terms of the artistry of it, because they were working so hard against the constraints that they had.
So who made that? Her long black hair. I've never heard about it before.
Oh God, I'd have to look that one up.
Okay. So at some point when I'm chatting, I want you to throw some of these links of the projects we're talking about into the chat log. And you should also, maybe this is a good point to pause and throw some of your links to No Pro.
Yeah.
So people can check that shit out.
So for those who don't, I'm going to toss it in right now. So we'll drop the link to No Pro in general. And all this stuff, if you go into the No Pro and you search and you say, type in her long black hair, you should find, I think it actually, what we do is, I think it's in the Now Playing New York. We keep a section that's just it's down in the pod plays section. We have we've successfully broken medium and used all sorts of techniques. So yeah, if you go down to the pod plays section, there is her long black hair
on the No Proscenium website. Is that what we're talking about?
On the No Proscenium website. So it's Janet Cardiff, and it's,
thank you, Wasef.
Yeah, it's 35 minutes long, and it's beyond delightful, and also it is a masterclass in that form of storytelling.
So what are some other projects from that early phase, or do you want to talk about that second wave, sort of 2016, 17, where we had that learnings from the first bout of projects? What are some other ones that stand out to you as sort of seminal projects? I mean, for me, the first one was Butts by Tyler Hurd. That was the first time I saw an animated virtual reality experience. This was 2014, I think. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's these two naked people who pull confetti out of their ass. And I think it does.
Wasn't it at part of it earlier, or the full version was at the, I feel like it was there. Did you bring it in to the lab?
Me? Oh yeah. Butts was everywhere I went. I loved that project. It was, but it was a great project and it's hilarious. But it was it was the first time. Tyler is the best. He really is. It was the first time that I saw characters that emoted and they felt like they're about this tall in your living room, and you were using the DK2 that had the positional tracking, so you got all that great depth data. It just worked. It was the first thing that I'd seen that worked, that had characters, that had a little emotional lives that you cared about for 3 minutes. It's that's an example of one of the seminal projects in that early phase for me.
In that early phase for me, one of the things I lament was that I feel like Mind Show was too early.
What's going on with Mind Show? I love those guys.
I absolutely love them. I haven't heard Hide Nor Hair in a while. I need to go poke Gil and see what's up.
I was just going on like a rabbit hole yesterday around Mind Show, looking on their YouTube feed, because they used to have all these great. So for those that don't know, Mind Show was this fantastic, or is a fantastic puppetry VR experience where you get to inhabit characters and you record little performances. It was at Sundance 2016, I think. They raised a decent amount of money.
It made its initial debut at VRLA because a lot of the people who ran VRLA formed that company. And the funny thing about it is, like, they brought me in a couple of days before for like a press preview, and they had been talking before about what it sounded like. We're gonna create like a gaze-based choose your own adventure system. Like the way they've been talking about it, I was expecting to walk in and say, okay, they've done a 360 video thing where if I look over here, I'm going to trigger option A, and if I look over here, I'm going to trigger option B, which I think somebody at some point has done, but like wouldn't take off either because it's not that compelling of a concept. Narratively.
Well, that was actually, I think it was I think they had two different ideas, because originally Johnny and Gil, that was the idea. It was some sort of editor gaze-based thing where time would slow down, and they built all of this stuff out. They think they actually released a video on it.
And I was brought in, and I was not primed to be excited about the idea. I was like, okay, we're gonna do this. Here we go. And instead found this like digital puppet thing, and was, surprised as hell and delighted by how much fun it could be, and the fact that we were basically doing like mocap off of Vive. And still limited because you had to you had to be on your thumbstick to like indicate what your thing was, etc. I think some of the issues there, one is like they chose the Vive, and at the time that was absolutely the right thing to do because it was the most fully functioning thing, because they brought that out again a little early. Like that was still the year when Oculus was really focused on, no, we want seated experiences. Like, they weren't trying to upsell like the full motion, they weren't selling sixed off because they were still like selling like, one sensor and, your controllers, and Mind Show wanted you to be embodied.
Yeah.
And the other thing, because I didn't have a Vive at home, so I didn't get to play it all the time. Only when like I was like, "Oh, you've got it, great! I'm going to play now." I don't know if someone in the chat can probably tell me. I don't know if they ever got to the point where there could ever be like simultaneous people in there at the same time, right? And in real time collaboration, it was a very
because I think it was always like you pass it back and forth, right?
Yeah,
you do like multiple takes, somebody else jumps in. Yeah, for me it was. I mean, the Vive is one of those things. It was like. So I think the whole story of VR can be, one lens to look at it is friction. And the Vive just simply had too much friction for me to use in my daily life. I bought a special computer for it. I have like my office that I set up for it. But even so, the process of booting up the computer, putting the headset on, closing all my windows because the light would fuck with the sensors. There'd be a bunch of updates that you need to, run. It's like a 10-minute like ordeal. And at the end of the day, when I'd have sort of my VR time, it was really hard to get across that hurdle. And I think they know that, which is why they're like more focused on like, the Quest, right? That solves all the problems.
Yeah. I mean, it can still be a challenge for me. I mean, this, I own two headsets, not counting, whatever cardboard accessory is around. One of which was the Go, which I fully admit I regret buying because it's like I used it for like I used it for like 4 weeks, and then it was like, okay, cool, I'm kind of done with it now. And then this puppy, you know, it'll occasionally go in the case, and then like I'll be like, oh right, like I got to bring it back out. Mostly because I'm not flush with cash, so I'm not buying software left and right. There's probably a few things that I would. There's a few games in there that I was like, wow, I wish I had the time to play these. Instead, I'm mostly obsessed with Beat Saber and Vader Immortal. And there's a few things coming down the pike that I'm
You got to check out Fuji. Have you gotten Fuji yet?
I haven't gotten Fuji. I need to get Fuji.
Oh, you got to get Fuji.
There's some Tai Chi stuff in there that I want to get, but really, I mean, the thing I'm, and I got to disclose, like I did a little bit of consulting for them. The thing that I'm excited about is the Underpresents, because the fact that we're going to bring in actors into a VR space and have them, you know, be these folks that people can play off of, is, you know, that's getting into the Diamond Age reactive dream, which for me was always the thing that I was most excited about. What VR, what AR could be for an actor. I trained as an actor. I trained as a designer and director in theater, and when I was in school was when, you know, like Cryptonomicon, that Neil Stephenson novel came out while I was in school. So like, you know, Diamond Age had been around for, you know, the better part of a decade, but I read it in school and I was like, oh my God, I wish this could be the job I had leaving school. I wish that I could, you know, just like work out of, you know, work out of my, my own apartment, like, you know, beaming into a scenario and performing for people that way, like an infinite stage that is in all places at all times.
Yeah.
And Underpresents starts to scratch that itch a bit. It was supposed to be up already, but from what I understand, they actually were given a little more runway.
Yeah, I got an email from Samantha the other day saying that they're still like hustling to finish it off. But I saw an early version at Sundance, and I guess you're buddies with them. You live in LA. You probably got like a demo at their office, or how did you see it?
Yeah, I got a demo at the office, and then I helped them. I helped them do auditions for actors.
Oh, badass!
Bring those people in, and that was maybe. I mean, that's been one of the highlights of my year. Like they paid me to do that. I was like, oh my God! I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you know, like thank you because I need money, but also like, but if this kind of thing that I would like, you know, theoretically do for free, but you know, there's rent. Like in a world where I'm just tithed a living, I'm like, of course I'm going to come in and do that, because to me that's actually the absolute most exciting thing. Is like, how do we move through these mediums? Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
The idea that like they're going to have the actors puppeting the characters just using the Quest. So there's a one-to-one correspondence in terms of what equipment that the audience is using, what equipment that the performers are using. The performers are going to have more control. They're using a different interface, but they're still physically tethered to the same kind of stuff. And what has to be done not only to like communicate those performances, but how do we even set up an audition? How do we judge whether or not someone's going to be, you know, take the chance that they're going to
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because their performance has to be mediated through the Quest, right? And that's sort of an unknown variable. People haven't been performing through Quests for very long.
People haven't been performing through Quests for very long.
It's the same thing for people who are doing live action VR, which is my big, I think the biggest beef with live action VR and the biggest opportunity is that there hasn't been much great acting in it. And it's a totally different medium. People have to calibrate their performances in a very different way. Well, and I haven't seen many things that can, you know, pull that off.
And for me, that's where the immersive theater stuff dovetails in, right? Like this discipline, immersive acting, is a discipline that lies on, and the easiest way to conceive of it is that it lies somewhere between film and theater, in that you need a performer who knows how to be fully embodied, but they also need to be able to work the close up, right? Like you want someone who's animated in the face. They can hold your attention that way. But they need to not look terribly awkward in a medium or a long shot, as it were. And there's a lot of actors in film, you know, who like their performances are assembled in the editing room. This is known. This is, you know, of legend. It's like, oh, so-and-so can't act their way out of a paper bag. We just edit them to be good. and you'll see it when you take a film actor sometimes and drop them into a stage performance, and they, and every single film actor, like, worth their salt, like, they want to go to Broadway, they want to perform in something, like, they'll produce their own work, and they chase that prestige because that's what it means to be an actor. And so many of them will just land straight on the pavement because they don't know how to fill the room the way they need to, or they're just wooden in their physicality, or they're too animated and they look ridiculous. It's a subtle craft. And the thing that excites me particularly about Los Angeles's immersive scene, there's so many great immersive actors in it. There's so many people who know how to ride that line between the physicality and the close-up. There's a piece.
Well, let's talk about that. Why don't you can you give me some examples of who your favorite groups are or artists are in LA? Because I don't know much about it. I want to know more.
I can do a little bit of a step better. And it doesn't perfectly capture.
Do you have them all in the next room? Are you going to bring them in right now? Is that the step better?
No.
That would be impressive.
There's a problem is like, I can't remember. There's one of the infinite number of niche video market players that you can get on, like, the Go, or that I think are in some of the marketplaces. And sadly, I cannot remember it. And the problem is that there's a project called The Willows that is not the Felix and Paula project. That is a show that's down here that pops up on occasion. And they shot about a 360 and a 180. I think the 180 is the only version that's available. There's a 180 version of it that you can get on one of these apps. The company that made it is called Just Fix It Productions. It's the people who make
Google
the theater.
People on the line, find it. Just Fix It.
Yeah. So just Fix It. They make the show The Willows, and there's some folks who brought them in, and the show, like, is multi-tracked in that, you can wind up on different tracks, and they use kind of almost a Telltale Games kind of scenario to kind of get you through. It's relatively cheap. The fundamental problem is that it's more performance when it's in the 180 than it is the true immersive. Like, they're can't
playing to the camera more,
react to what you're doing because you're just watching that video, but you get a little bit of the sense of what, like, you actually get to kind of walk through. You get to walk through the piece, as it were, and so you get a tiny little taste, and you get to see some of those actors in the piece. It's also highly stylized, so they're not giving you realistic performances.
Is that the right link, Noah? Marta just posted.
Marta's GFI Productions, The Willows. That's the right show. I'm trying to see if that's attend the show. Yeah. The Willows they've got a section on the VR in the Amaze app. There it is. Thank you, Marta.
Amaze. Yeah. I know
so it's in Amaze, and it's like $3 or $4. As someone who's seen the show, it was really great because there are certain tracks I hadn't seen, and it kind of let me, like, get kind of the Cliff Notes version of it. It's still a bit that phase of, like, television adaptations of plays, right? Like, the true version of this would be if we were doing this in a volumetric capture and be able to walk around. But there's one of the performers in there, Dasha Kittredge, who plays, I think her character's name is Angela in this. Like, she's one of the great LA immersive actors. There's a company here called the Speakeasy Society. Their stuff tends to be a little like on the spectrum between, like, theatrical and like fully adventure immersive. They're on the more theatrical side. They also have some really great actors. There's a cat in there, Michael Bates, who was tapped to do the live mocap performances for Chained, A Victorian Nightmare, which Justin.
Yeah, what'd you think about that? I didn't see it, but I've heard detailed descriptions of it.
Yeah, and, like, Chained's in that genre of, there's a mocap stage as an actor and you're in VR at the same time, and it's a Christmas Carol. There's some that in that genre which are a little bit more about, like, creating, like, an empathetic experience between you and another person, and there's some stuff that's, like, really on the art side, and this is definitely more on the pop side of things, if you will.
Yeah, well, they're aiming for commercial viability. It's funded by Madison Wells Media, who is Gigi Pritzker's company. They've got deep pockets, and I know they're trying to make make these types of experiences financially viable.
Yeah, which is difficult. I mean, I think the hardest thing across the board.
It's about throughput, right?
Hmm?
It's throughput, right? Like it's just so hard to get people to enough to, warrant the cost of putting on a production.
Yeah. So like you have to peg the price somewhere where it makes sense, right? And like how much are people willing to spend on 20 minutes of entertainment? Delusion, which had which they also adapted one of their shows, although they adapted that kind of they had more of a film shoot thing. Skybound helped them do that. They're doing a small pop-up this year, which they call Alt Delete tickets, or tickets for their newsletter. People went on sale yesterday, and like I think everybody else, it opens up today. But there may be a press release sitting in my email inbox by the time I get off this. They're doing like a 20-minute pop-up this season, and they're charging $40. So it's like $2 a minute. That's
about the going rate. It's somewhere between $1 and $2 a minute that most people are charging, which is interesting because it's high, but it's also like, it's all about value, right? Are you getting that much value? And I think it's a case by case basis.
Yeah, and the problem is like it's high, and it's also not necessarily enough to break even, right? This is the hard part, right? Is like, there's a sweet spot in terms of perceived value, right? Like the advantage that the digital has is that it's replayable. Like a lot of work goes in on the front end, but then you can reproduce it.
Yeah, there's zero marginal costs. You can reproduce it forever.
Yeah, like I mean, you got to keep a server running, but like that's pretty much it, right? With the live stuff, every time you reproduce it, you've got to pay the actors, you've got to pay, everybody, and to try and get them up to a living wage, suddenly things are getting really costly. So what can you do to make that a compelling experience? What can you do to justify someone spending $1, $2, $3 a minute in order to, and we'll get feedback on shows where people walk out and be like, that was $70, right?
Yeah, it's so hard, but then you need that high ticket price to justify it. Otherwise such a tricky thing.
Yeah, otherwise the company can't exist.
You're buddies with a lot of these people that are facing this. What are they doing for that? Are they saying we should even charge more but deliver greater value, or that we need to get the price down? Like, how do you? There's certain things that you can't reduce in terms of cost. Like, people need, to be paid if they're, running a show.
No one's cracked the nut, but here's a couple of things people are trying. One is, the idea of selling the slot and not the ticket, right? That's
what do you mean?
The highest perceived value is always going to be the one-on-one experience, right? Now, you have to pay attention to what you're providing. If you're providing something that's essentially, 20 minutes of a performer, performing for you, that has a less perceived value than if you are, co-creating it or experience it, or like, how much, I often refer to emotional agency. How much emotional agency are you provided with? How much can your reactions determine their performance, right? The difference between
that is the unique offering that you have, right? Because you could be watching a movie or a play or anything otherwise.
Precisely. And it does not have to be narrative agency. I think a lot of people look at this and say like, oh, you want to be able to control the story. I'm like, no, I want to. Sometimes I realize like it means directing the scene, but almost in a passive way. Like instead of being like, no, now I want you to be angry. It's like, play off me.
Put the horsey suit back on. I want the horsey suit.
Right. But it's like, you need, it's really like when an immersive.
That's totally how I would be. If I had any agency, I would just fuck everybody over. I'd be like the worst audience member ever. I'm so bad with those ththings. I'm always like, I'm going to break it.
There's people who go in and definitely intending to break it, but like I feel like the ideal mindset to me, and indeed, this is like what I enjoy is, are my authentic reactions shaping what's going on, even if the script doesn't change?
Yeah. Is my presence being acknowledged, and are like, is the I kind of think of it as like whenever I'm doing anything that's great whether it's live or otherwise, is that it's almost like they're reading my mind and the world around is responding to my emotions that I'm feeling. If I'm either heightening them or contrasting them, but it's aware of where my emotional state is and having an impact because of that.
And it is technically possible to like manipulate things so that the director has almost absolute control over that. You also have to have a bit of a touch of the sociopath to you to be able to pull that trick off. But when things are working well, I feel it's in the hands of a great actor. It's in the hands of someone who's treating the audience member like they're their scene partner. And you can play a given scene all kinds of ways. That's what makes theater in particular interesting, is like, I want to go see, DiCaprio's Hamlet and compare it to Brad Pitt's Hamlet. Neither of them played Hamlet, but like, I'm just couldn't think of dude.
But I do want to see both of those people do Hamlet now.
But now, I would like to see both of those people do Hamlet. So it's like, you want to be able to tell, and they're going to play it differently. Those actors are going to play it differently, but they're also going to play that scene differently based off who's opposite them. And when you create a scenario in one of these pieces that gives the performer enough room to respond authentically to what the audience is doing, to how they're responding, even if the script doesn't change. If you're writing that way, then you're writing good drama. And the X factor is the other performer. And this is something I think that, an obsession with storytelling, an obsession with lore, an obsession with building a world can kind of get in the way of. It's got to have the drama, because the drama is what creates the room for emotion, and emotion is the thing that connects people to the story. And then you open up everyone to the lore that you're building, the world that you've made. You believe in the world that you've made, but you must execute it through drama. You must execute it through the emotion. And if you've provided that to an actor, then you get someone walking up and like, they will pay whatever you ask of them to have that experience, that heightened experience. This is the fundamental point for me, is that, you can justify all kinds of monetary valuations on an experience if it's executed at a high enough level, right?
Totally. Oh yeah.
We know this because this extends far beyond entertainment or theater or film. We know this through dining. We know this through adventure travel. We know
like jumping out of an airplane. That costs what, like $200-$300?
Yeah.
Lasts 2 minutes. Think about the per minute cost of jumping out of an airplane. Very high. But it's an intense experience.
Yeah. We know this through other human endeavors, right? If the quality of the experience is high enough, then, cost isn't a barrier. I often talk about the fine dining model, right?
Totally.
Like some of this immersive stuff is it's going to be the fine dining model. Other things are about the throughput, the risk is, people often talk about the throughput on Sleep No More and how they're like pushing more and more people through it. And that degrades the experience, right? The experience then becomes, here's 200 people running into a room trying to watch a scene and you're jockeying for position. That can be a terrible experience.
Yeah, that's going to pull you out of all of that. That makes it a different kind of game that you probably don't want to play.
Right. And gets in the way of the experience that the theater was, trying to create. So, there's sadly no hard and fast rule. Although maybe also it's great there's no hard and fast rule, because a hard and fast rule for this stuff would take out a lot of the art side of it, right?
But we do need to start finding some examples of things that work, even if they're disparate and high end, low end, whatever. But I want to shift gears a little bit because we're running up towards the end of the hour, and I think what we've been talking about is a natural transition into, and maybe you don't have any insight into this, but I'm really curious. On the immersive theater side, how are people funding their productions? How are they getting enough capital to put on something, to rent a theater, et cetera, et cetera? Are there people that are investing in immersive theater, or is it troops that all, tap their community? What's the funding landscape like?
If something's at a big enough scale, there are definitely and we haven't talked about like the experiential marketing side.
Yeah, I was about to say like Meow Wolf, right? Like that's kind of plays into this as well, right? That's the mega throughput.
Yeah, well, and that's another silo, right? So there's like, there's experiential art and there's location-based entertainment, right? So Meow Wolf, depending on your point of view, we can talk about Meow Wolf as location-based entertainment the way we talk
And
about
for
the
those of you who
Void.
don't know, it's a like insanely large 50,000 square foot warehouse that a bunch of artists have taken over. And it's kind of this Alice in Wonderland trip where you go down the rabbit hole.
Better than a warehouse. The story. This is a great story. So
Bowling alley, right?
Santa Fe is America's third largest art market. Something that you don't know about until you go to Santa Fe and someone turns to you and goes like, did you know Santa Fe? And then you go to downtown Santa Fe and you're like, oh, I can believe it, because every corner there's a gallery, and then a lot of big galleries and prestigious galleries like out in the rest of Santa Fe. And Meow Wolf was this art collective of like Santa Fe's art brats and punk kids in the aughts, doing stuff in their houses and in like, warehouse spaces that were given, and then ultimately work their way up into the gallery spaces.
I missed it. I almost took a screenshot of you making a ridiculous face.
Oh, okay.
You got frozen in a really perfect moment. Can you just make another like fucked up face and I'll take a screenshot and pretend?
So it's gonna occur. What got frozen? Did the words keep going?
No. You were talking about art brats that got together. You're giving us the genesis of Meow Wolf.
Yeah. So they were these wonderful like punk art brats who got together, kind of rebelling against what can often be a rather staid art scene in Santa Fe, and they did. Their chosen medium was kind of the happening and the large scale installation, and they leveled up through a sequence of events. And one day, one of them talked George R.R. Martin, freshly flush from HBO Game of Thrones cash, into buying the bowling alley in Santa Fe that had just like gotten shut down, and he was like, hey, George, could you become our landlord? And so George became their landlord, and they went in and converted a bowling alley into this large, multi-phase experiential art thing. Like every art team was kind of given their own corner to do something in. They framed the whole thing with like an underlying story about like a house like becoming a vortex into the multiverse. So you see this Victorian, they built this like Victorian house inside a bowling alley, and then from there you kind of go through, like you can walk through the refrigerator or go out the back door or crawl through like the dryer.
Yeah, that refrigerator is the money shot that always gets replayed on social media. You're in a house, you open the refrigerator, it's a portal.
Yeah, and then you walk through to like there's all these other rooms that have themes of their own and like stories of their own throughout the space. And then at the heart of the space, where the bowling lanes used to be, is a music venue. So very smartly, it's both like by day, it's this incredible playground for both kids and the young at heart, and by night, it's a pop and music venue. And when they had a Kickstarter, they had a for-profit crowdfunding thing, and when they launched, Amanda Palmer performed, and so they got a hell of a lot of buzz. And then they flipped that, and they're a B corporation, by the way. They flipped that into this kind of quest to bring that to some of the other secondary markets in the States. So
they've got Las Vegas, they've got one in Denver, they've got one somewhere on the East Coast.
They're planning.
They've raised an insane amount of money, and they've got an army of artists. Have you been to their studio? Have you been to the studio where they're making all this stuff?
Have you?
I have. It's insane. They've got like 500 artisans, like handcrafting shit in this giant warehouse of a studio.
It used to be even better than warehouse. It used to be the Caterpillar factory.
Yeah,
in Santa Fe. It was like formerly the largest employer in now they're other than the government, they're the largest employer in Santa Fe, right? Like they employ more people. They keep on hiring my friends and dragging them away from Los Angeles.
Yep. Yeah. Alethea just got hired away. Do you know her? She was a producer at Atlas 5, and now she's working for Meow Wolf.
Oh, I missed the name.
Oh, Alethea. She's a great producer. She's LA based.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, and like,
they're on one end of the spectrum. So there's this experiential installation based thing. There aren't performers besides, like music performances and such, but that model works. That's a business model that works. So you've got ticket sales
they're starting to sneak in
throughput that's crazy.
They're sneaking performers the way sort of like theme park sneaking performers, a little more on the street.
Okay, I didn't know that. Nice.
And they're doing some ARG related stuff. Like they're highly experienced. They work in every medium, right? Because at the end of the day, they are an art collective, and their artists get curious. So like they're messing around with Magic Leap, they're messing around with VR, they've got AR apps. All of it ultimately is tied to the story world that they're building, and their story world is intended to create like a shell in which they can operate their physical installations, and the physical installation is the gate, and they can push enough people through. I will say, I've been there on days when it was so crowded that I was like, whoa. But it's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to Denver, which is going to be a 5-story facility.
Massive. Like dwarfs their one in Santa Fe.
Yeah. And that's the thing, the Santa Fe one is like a fluke and an accident. And just like, like it's a major attraction into an off the beaten path town. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens when it lands in Vegas and when it lands in Denver. I think Vegas is going to be a little bit funky because like it's the anchor tenant of this kind of reimagined shopping entertainment thing called Area 15 that the Fisher brothers are bankrolling. And so I feel like there's like kind of there's a chance that it could like really like sing and shine, but like Vegas is such a weird gamble because you never know what's going to chase. And there was a lot of motion in the scene a couple of years ago where the different casinos, the different casino groups, they were courting a lot of the immersive theater folks, and they were courting people, doing this sort of design, looking at things that are kind of like Meow Wolf, or looking at adapting in shows. So, the Russo brothers company bought the rights to the Tension Experience, which is the immersive theater like horror piece that Darren Lynn Bousman, the director of Saws 2, 3, and 4 created. That project hasn't sprouted up yet. I know they were talking with like different casinos in Vegas as being the place we're going to stand it up. There's a thing called Kind Heaven, which Perry Farrell is involved in, which also like taking like a shopping part of Vegas and converting it into something that feels a little bit more like, what if we had a permanent installation of a music festival?
Interesting.
There was an article just the other day. Sadly, I don't have the link because I only read the headline and then was like flipping past to the next thing. Where someone was making the argument that as AEG and Live Nation sort of stabilize and create like a normal stable of acts for these music festivals, that the thing that's going to be differentiating them is like, what are the experiential side? And you look at things like Electric Forest or Coachella, or let's be honest, you look at the Gathering of the Juggalos or Burning Man, and like all of these things, this is not rarefied air. Right. Yeah. Like there's actually these huge parts of different aspects of the entertainment industry who are playing this immersive experiential space to the point where like you don't even notice that it's happening, but it's there in the background. The problem.
So those examples are all ones that are commercially viable and successful. I'm curious about the kids in LA that are doing these weird, theater things. Is that, how are they getting, how is that surviving? How are people funding their projects?
It's still a lot of bootstrapping, and it's still a lot of, we've had a couple of good crowdfunding success stories. There's a piece called The Nest, which is doesn't have any live performers, but it's a twist on the escape room genre, and that it's this lovely story that's told through a series of audio tapes, literally tapes. They hand you a tape player at the beginning, and like you got to go find the tapes in the space, and you put the tapes in, you're playing along, and then you're uncovering as you're exploring this storage unit that belonged to this elderly lady who passed. And it's this ethereal, lovely tale that's performed on the audio tracks by like some of those immersive theater actors, and it's produced by two guys who who used to work at WDI. So like a very high level of execution there. You can be cagey about talking about it because like in WDI does not like, having their credits attached to like projects that aren't theirs. But at the end of the day, like they're going to be able to be proud of what these two guys created. And that one had a successful crowdfunding run. and then opened up their ticket sales for a run that goes from September through December. And within like 2 days, despite having a lot of run, they only had like 28 slots left for a 4-month run. And indeed, the way they're doing it is the ticket price is, not cheap, but it's for 1 or 2 people at a time. And so you can decide to take a friend or not. And so much like the way escape rooms are, selling the slot as opposed to selling the ticket in order to control your experience better.
Nice. So we're rounding the end of our conversation. I want to make sure that anybody on the line can jump in and ask a question. So if you have got a question for Noah, throw it in the chat log, or let me know that you'd like to come in on video, and I can bring you in and you can ask him direct. And in the meantime, this is whenever I do one of these calls, I'm always, again, like I'd be doing this call with you anyways. There just happens to be people on the line. So one of the things that I'm percolating in my mind right now is at Kaleidoscope, we're trying to, one of the things that we've had a lot of success with is in one format or another, doing something that looks like a showcase, where we take the time to select projects that we really believe in, and then give them some platform where they get to connect with industry, so that the industry side is like, okay, somebody took the time to show me the best work in a particular topic, and then that gives me confidence that I'm not going to be wasting my time. And on the artist side, it gives them the ability to make those connections that can turn into funding, distribution, support of one kind or another. And I love this community that you're a part of, and I'm not super embedded like you are. I think we should do some sort of showcase where we pick 10 projects that are part of this immersive theater thing, that are in development, that are, looking for support, that haven't gone into production yet. Or maybe they've got a production, but they're wanting to do a bigger version of it. And we get them together and we have them pitch to investors. What do you want to do that, Noah? You want to do that with me?
Funny you should mention that. Yes, it's a topic that's come up a couple of times. There's some folks I know who are working on some stuff like that. And there's also, we were the co-producers on the Immersive Design Summit for the last 2 years. And one of my
seems like it's blowing up.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's blowing up in a couple different ways. And we're gonna do the sequel in Los Angeles, and we're gonna do, the dream has been to attach like a festival side to it.
Nice. But where you actually see work.
We're both about to be pulled into the vortex of Vancouver International Film Festival, right? So we're going to be pulled into VIFF in a couple different ways, and there's definitely space for that kind of showcase. I know some friends who work on something they refer to as upfronts. I know that my long-term dream is to have the Sundance of immersive, and where I want to wind up at the end of the day is I want to be over in the labs. I want to be helping people give birth to great work. The irony, of course, is that Sundance started as a lab, put up a festival. The festival had conferences attached, and they wound up with, a whole distribution network. And so I've kind of been almost going backwards. We started with a newsletter. We started putting spotlights on workers, and, kind of pulling back to the point where we can get to having this spot at the core. And these are things that I'm setting up, and I'm setting them as nonprofits in order to weather the storm of the market, right?
It's taking a while to mature.
Troughs, it's okay, let's find a way to take some of the risk out of this. I think just threw a great idea, and we should talk about that offline. So
no, I want to talk a little bit more about it now because I've got you on the line, and I think it's interesting. So I just threw a link in for the VIFF, Vancouver International Film Festival co-production market that I'm producing, and you're a judge on. Anybody on the line that's got a project in development, you should submit to it. But Noah, so for that thing, can you reach out to some immersive theater people? I would love to have, 1 or 2 projects that are in this immersive world that are in development, looking for co-production to have at that market. It's coming up, but I think that's an early thing that we could try to tap into that community. Do you know of anybody that would be a good fit for that?
If immersive, that's limited to in Canada, right? I mean, we've got
No, it can be Canada, international. Doesn't matter.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
we can put the call out. Yeah, we can make the holler. We've got 4 or 5 ways to like reach out to folks. And say,
Yeah. If there's got to be somebody in LA or anywhere really, it doesn't matter, LA or otherwise, that's got one of these projects that's percolating, that's at the right stage, that they're ready to talk to somebody. Anyway, so that's one thing. Let's try to make that happen, and then let's figure out like a bigger showcasey thing where we get a number of really amazing projects. I know I've got a couple that I could pull in. Vinny DePonto, who you met at DevLab, he's got a really cool project that he's working on that's like immersive theater, magic, tech, all mashed up into one.
Yeah, I think we just did that up at North Bend Film Festival, like the first instance.
Yeah, that's right.
No, I mean, my dream in the long run is for there to be like a circuit for this stuff, right? And like we start to see that happening, and like for me, that's like the next project is to like stick a node down, and what form the festival side of the summit and festival takes. Like there's one issue of like trying to like. One goal is to like expose more people to the work, right? So it's like we want to bring something in that we're going to be able to pump through, because like some of these shows, they'll get there are shows here in LA where they do a 5-week run. It's like thank you to all 70 people who came and saw us.
Yeah,
and you're like,
it's so small,
and a lot of those 70 people are the same 70 people who go see everything. And it's like, it's great that they can sustain the work of these artists, but it doesn't mean like things aren't growing. And the potential, there is the potential there to grow it. There are some people I know who like, they don't want it to grow. They're like, oh, like it's never going to grow. This is always going to be a niche thing. It's like, and I'm like, yeah. And I'm so happy for you that your favorite band never blew up and you didn't, have to share them with anyone else either. Like, lucky for you. Meanwhile, those band members, like they're still working at Costco, man.
Yeah.
So like maybe check what your motivations are. So the idea that we can get this stuff to be sustainable for these artists is the absolute number one goal. And I think the trick is like, is there a matter of demonstrating what can handle high throughput, or is there a matter of who's got the chops to could be brought in to do experiential marketing? Lex had a question of, and the reason why I bring this up now, what are my thoughts on pop-ups geared towards social media posting, like museums or selfie palaces, and are they good or bad for the development? It really depends on how they're executed, right? Like I've seen ones where the design focus is on creating something where you can experience it with your friends, and it's not just a hollow marketing, like moment. Like, I was sort of turned off by Refinery 29 the last time they were in LA because
it felt very empty. Like,
like there were some moments, like there were some things that were like really interesting and compelling. I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's a gallery thing. But like people were more interested to stand in line to like get their boomerang shot in front of the Toyota display. Yeah. And I was like, huh? What? Like they were gravitating towards those moments, and they weren't necessarily interacting with these some very weird but beautiful art, or people were like not catching what social commentary Janelle Monáe was making with the installation piece that she had put together. And I'm like, one, you're missing a Janelle Monáe installation art piece that like did the conceptual design. She's on. Amazing. Like, how are you ignoring that? And just like, oh, look at me, I'm doing a selfie where I'm wearing a unicorn head, like standing next to a television head thing. And it's like, yeah, you're also missing like that those mannequins with the television heads are like shackled at their ankles, and there's surveillance cameras that are feeding your image real time into that television head. Like there's a piece of art here, and you're just like all like, get that as your screenshot. But when it's not impossible for these things to create joy and to create respite, or to create a platform for connection, the question is whether or not someone's thinking their way through to doing that. And those questions are often not asked in a real way, right? Like, this from meetings. You'll go to meetings and people like, all right, we're going to create an experience for folks, right? So we want people to connect deeply with our brand. It's important that they feel that they have the agency within the confines of our brand to understand the values that we're putting forward. All right, so cool. So here's our chicken nugget. and they can take photo infrared. And that is the whole, like, it's like, I'm going to speak to the values of what's happening and then point to the piece of art that we know how to construct. Because we know this, I'm going off script here. We all know there are people who, like, monkey see, monkey do. They hear the terminology and they're like, oh, I can repeat that back. Like this stuff is just like, this is air. These are words. At the end of the day, what are we doing? We're building sets and we're dropping them in front of people and we're giving them space to take photographs. Like that's what it is at the end of it. And if you want to reduce it down to that, sure, you can, but you will miss out on the fact that if you do the real work and you design for play and you design for connection and you start to ask, like, okay, well, like, how are they interacting with the chicken nugget? Like, are they climbing on it? What's it made out of? Is it sponge? Could they cleanly take a bite out of it? Right? Like, what's going on here? How is it not static? Or even like, what are we saying? Like, is it just an ode to consumerism? Like, because, I'll get reports back from things like there's one of these museums, these pop-up museums here, is put on by Weed Maps, who's like a cannabis distributor, or a company that leads you to, like, dispensaries. And they did the Museum of Weed. And, one of our people went and we were fully expecting, like, this is going to be stupid. And it's like, no, like, they really did. It's a museum about cannabis prohibition. And they go deep on it. They also have, like, like, here's the reefer madness, like, selfie spot. But then also they're telling the story of, like, well, how did that get to? Who did that impact? Like, why was the reefer madness, right? Culture always has a context. And, like, are you bringing that context forward? Are you creating moments for people to connect together? It's not even hard. It's not easy, but, like, it's not as hard as you think it is if you really ask the question, particularly around, like, what are people doing? Like, what are they doing? Is this by themselves or are they connecting with other folks? And you sit with that and you iterate on that until you make it happen. And not just go, like, all right, I said values and I said interactivity and I said agency and we're good. Let's get those sketches up.
Man, great off script answer to Lex's question. Do we have any other questions on the line? Lex, you got a follow up? I think I've plumbed your brain. I'm out of questions, but I know we could, like, continue chatting about this for way longer.
Oh yeah.
And I think we should. And because again, you've got your finger on the pulse of this community more than anyone else I know. And I'm really excited. Let's find a way to do something outside of just the VIF thing. I'll follow up about that right after our call.
Yeah, no, we should definitely do that.
All right, buddy. Thank you a bajillion times for taking the time out of your day to join us. And this afternoon, we actually have another one. This is unusual for us to do 2 in one day, but Edwan is an amazing artist. He's living in Tokyo right now, and he is the artist behind Waba and Cuteness Technology. He's got something called Wuppets, which is a AR app that allows you to puppeteer on your phone these ridiculous, cute little creatures. So join us at 5 p.m. Pacific time to chat with Edwan. He's a real mensch of a person and a great artist. So hope to see you then. And otherwise, Noah, we'll catch you later, buddy.
I will catch you soon.
All right. Thank you, guys. Cheers. Bye.